Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Thomas, and welcome back to welcome back to the Jenny Show. Today is episode 2, and on the show, we bring in different guests and talk about different topics of things that are going on in the world or just interesting, just anything really. So today we have a very special guest. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Silke Thomas. I grew up in East Germany and I lived there for 20 years before moving out here to America.
I just wanted to kind of discuss, because this is actually a big shift from last episode's topic. I wanted to discuss what it's like immigrating to the U.S. and also what it was like in Germany, especially during the time, because when you lived there, the Berlin Wall was up and Berlin was separated into two. So I wanted to talk about what that was kind of like coming from someone that lived there.
Okay.
So
yes,
I guess we could start off, like, if you want to talk about what your life was like living in Germany before you moved here, like because me and I gotta assume most of the viewers didn't ever really live in Germany. So, what's kind of different, I guess, or like what was that like growing up there?
All right, so yeah, I was born in the 70s and I grew up in Leipzig or Taucha, close to Poland in East Germany, and I lived there for 20 years before coming here. And I went to school when I was really little. We had kindergarten, first grade through 8th grade. It was all in one school. I enjoyed going to school. We had like normal school, and we went to school on Saturdays. So Mondays through Saturdays we had school, and I enjoyed going to school. And then after school I stayed at aftercare, and then I came home. My parents were home, and I enjoyed everything.
So something that's interesting to me, I guess, that you've told me about before is just how different the schooling is, I guess, in Germany compared to America. Because like you mentioned, it's Monday through Saturday rather than our normal Monday through Friday. And also, I remember you mentioning about like that summer break is like shorter as well, and how like I feel like Germany prioritizes education a lot more than here in America. So is there like any big differences there?
Well, I don't know between East and West Germany, but yes, we had 6 weeks of summer break, and that was it. And we looked really forward to it when we knew it was July or whatever, and then our summer break would start. We were really excited for the 6 weeks off.
Yeah, so also you are a first grade teacher now as well. And when you started that, like just teaching in general, was there anything like almost like a big difference between like how the culture kind of was when you grew up with education in Germany and compared to now you're teaching these kids? Is there any like big shifts in what kind of you might be like teaching during that age or such?
Well, funny story, because growing up in East Germany, I feel like now thinking back many, many years, the German teachers, the East German teachers were not very nice, and I never actually wanted to be a teacher. And when I came here and I started over and I wanted to do something different, didn't know really what I wanted to do, so I started studying and I went to school and I started working with children, and I realized, maybe I can do a difference or do something different than what my teachers did back then, because especially my history teacher in Germany, he was not very nice. He was actually very mean, and I actually hated history. I never wanted to learn about history, or I didn't care in this class. I didn't like his class, and I also didn't want to be a teacher. But then when I came here and I started working with kids, I'm like, I want to be different than this guy. So So yes, so when I first started coming here, and then I started taking classes, and I enjoyed working with kids, and that's how I wanted to become a first grade teacher.
Yeah, I really like that, and I think, I mean, from what I've seen, you seem to really enjoy your career now, and I think that's really, I like the shift that you had in between not liking that teacher and now you're a teacher, to kind of like make that change, I guess.
Yes.
So I guess if we're going in chronological order, so we started you living in Germany. I guess now we can kind of discuss like, so was the wall up? Like do you know when the wall like first went up?
Yes, the wall came up in 63, I think, and my mom was really little, and she was actually on a trip with my grandma. So my mom was on a trip with her mom, and the wall came up so quickly that my grandma had to make a decision: do I go back home? Do I stay on the east side, or do I go back on the west side? And my grandma made the decision to come back home to the east side with my mom when she was really little, and she took care of all the other brothers and sisters that she had in her house, and that's how we could have ended up on both sides, either West or East Germany, but we stayed in East Germany for a while, or since the wall came up in 63.
All right, so then, I mean, maybe I should have started with this, but like just for the viewers that might not understand, could you explain a little bit about like what the history of the wall is and like how that all kind of came together?
Sure. So, well, with the World War and everything, so there was Germany was occupied by the Russians really early on, and then but got taken over, and then the Russians wanted a lot more territory, and to end the war, the Second World War, the Russians took over the eastern part of Germany, and they decided to put a wall up as a symbol, but only in Berlin. So there was a wall in Berlin in the middle of a town, kind of like, think about Chicago, and then there's a wall in the middle of Chicago, but it was Berlin. But you couldn't go anywhere. The West, so it turned into West Berlin and East Berlin. That's how it started. And then West Berlin, if you lived in the west side of the wall of Berlin, you could go anywhere else to the west side. And if you lived in the eastern side of the wall, you could only go to the east side. And then it turned out, so then they turned the whole Germany into East Germany and West Germany, and the Berlin was the capital, but it was East Berlin and West Berlin. It was really, really weird. So I was little, and it was really hard to understand. But I grew up in East Germany my whole life, and it was fine. I enjoyed living there, and when I was 13, the wall came down in 88, 89, and it still didn't really make sense why there was a country that was really tiny, and it was split in half, if you will, and the capital was split in half, and half of it was occupied by, the Russians or whatever, and then the other half was occupied by the western side. So I was still little, and it didn't really make sense. But when finally the wall came down in 88 or 89, I was 13, 14, and then I started to understand it a little bit more, and yeah, it was hard, but I was still little, and I think my mom, my parents, my mom and dad, they took it a little harder. They seen a lot more, and then my grandma and my grandpa. But to me, it was like, okay, let's move on. So the wall's down, and let's explore more from the whole world.
Yeah, I don't think I could really imagine having something where like if you took for Chicago, for example, and having to stay on one side, like that would just be really difficult, especially like even at a young age. I feel like that'd be something that you're just like, what? Like that's kind of
Yes, and a lot of the people wanted to escape. I mean, it was 40 years of this wall.
wow.
So it was 89, so it was 49 to 89 ish. But a lot of people wanted to escape, and you could not. So once you were in East Germany, there was no escape. You couldn't get out. And if you tried anything else, it was, you either got arrested or worse. Yeah.
So that's rough, and that's just it's such a big part of history as well. Like we learned. I remember we learned about it in one of my high school classes, and it was really interesting because I was like, well, I have someone in my life that actually lived through that, but I think that's just such a big part and big interesting part that like that happened, and for 40 years as well is just such a large amount of time for that to be split in half.
Yes, and again, so I was little. I was 13 until all of the wall came down, and to me it was normal. I had a normal life. We didn't have... Normal life means no TV. I mean, we had one TV, but it didn't have any stations or channels. It was black and white. We didn't really see anything. We didn't have any TV, telephones, or anything. So we just basically were kids. We played outside. We played ball, had a little bike. We rode bikes here and there. My family all lived in the same town. My grandma, my grandpa, my other grandma, my other grandpa, my mom and dad, my aunts and uncles. We all lived in the same town. So if we had to go visit them, we just either walked over there or rode the bike, and we had a good time. We always had birthday parties, Christmas, everything. If we wanted to go in the bigger city, we took the streetcar, and then toys-wise, we didn't have many toys, but we made it work. My sister and I, we played with each other, and there was a little store next door to our little apartment, and it was funny because every time I came home from school, aftercare, my parents were still at work, they would say, as soon as I get home, like at 3 or 4 o'clock, I need to go right next door to the store so I can get in line so we can get the bananas or the oranges. And then, so I would stand in line. The line was really long out the door. I would stand in line. My parents weren't home yet. And then usually by the time I get to the register, they were unfortunately out of bananas or oranges.
Oh no.
And then I just have to go home and then try again the next day.
Honestly, I mean, not that like I ever thought Germany was like super different from like America. Like obviously it has its differences, but like from like my childhood as well, like I didn't really grow up with a lot of technology, I feel like. I mean, I was kind of in that transitioning age where technology was kind of like starting to become more prominent, but that seems like a pretty, I mean, I guess standard childhood. I mean, even growing up in a completely different country on the opposite side of the world. So, no, that's really nice then that I guess the wall and everything didn't, I guess, change that much about your childhood. I mean, you didn't experience it for too many years, I guess. So
yeah, like I said, I just saw it through the eye of a child. So to me, it was normal.
Yeah.
Looking back, it's not really normal, but we did have a good childhood. So my family was really close. We enjoyed each other, and we went on a lot of vacations. Vacations were all within East Germany, so we didn't really go out of the country or anything. But we did have a good childhood.
That's good then. So I think now, I guess, to kind of bring this to an end, I just want to kind of talk briefly about what exactly it was like immigrating. So kind of like what was your decision into coming at only 20 years old? Like, that's, I mean, not my age. I mean, I'm still a little bit younger than that, but like people around my age at that age decided to go across the ocean and then go into a completely new country with so many different things, and kind of like what motivated you to immigrate, and then just kind of what it was like going through that whole process.
All right, so then finally, so when the wall came down in 89, we had a lot more, so 90, 91, we had a lot more opportunities for schooling, and the school system all changed and everything. And then I decided I wanted to learn or see more from the world and learn more languages, and I just signed up with this organization, and I wanted to I wanted to learn more English, because we never really, experienced languages at school other than Russian or a little bit here and there. But I wanted to see the world more, and signed up with this organization to either England or America. And the first family that called me, so I was an au pair in America, the first family that called me, I just said yes. And I wanted to, the reason why I did that is just I was still young, and probably been realizing that there is more to the world than just this little country called East Germany. So I just said yes, and then the family called, and they said okay, and then literally like a month later I packed my bag, and I've never flown anywhere, so I flew from Frankfurt to London, and then London to New York, and that was my first plane ride ever. And then I landed in Hinsdale, and I was supposed to stay for a year and with the organization, and it was a great year, and I really learned a lot, and I had a good time. And yes.
So you took the plane, you said Frankfurt to London, and London to New York, and then from New York, did you, because Hinsdale's in Illinois, so did you...
New York to Chicago, yes, after a couple of days. So Frankfurt to London, stayed there for a couple hours, and then London to New York, and then in New York we were for like 3 days. And I've never seen tall buildings, and it was actually quite the experience, walking around as a 20-year-old in a completely different part of the world. And we were there for 3 days, and then I learned some people. I came with nobody, yes, it was just me. And 3 days orientation in New York, and then I took the plane to Chicago, and then I met my family at O'Hare, and it was right around Halloween. I've never really experienced Halloween either, and when I met them, and yeah, that was that.
All right, so I think that brings us to the end of this this podcast episode today. So Silka, I wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit about your life experience with all of that. It was a very interesting story to hear about.
I'm sure I could tell some more, but that's all for today then.
Yep. All right.
Thank you for listening.
So that basically wraps it up for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. If you're interested in seeing more episodes of The Jenny Show, every Friday at 12 p.m. you could find me here on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, just the regular podcast platforms and such. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next week, Friday at 12 p.m. Bye.